Worldwide, we're looking at approximately 350 million people with diabetes. There's no question that we're in the midst of a diabetes epidemic. Right now, 1 in 3 Medicare dollars is spent in the care of people with diabetes. 1 in 10 total healthcare dollars is spent on people with diabetes. There's no question that this is a major problem.
What in particular is the correlation with the diet and diabetes?
I'm not going to get into that.
Into diet?
No.
The World Health Organization this morning has classified processed meat such as bacon and sausage as carcinogenic, directly involved in causing cancer in humans.
Processed meat is clearly linked to an increase in cancer.
Hot dogs or bacon could be just as dangerous as smoking cigarettes.
The World Health Organization had looked at over 800 studies from 10 different countries, finding a direct link to consuming processed meat and cancer. Just one serving of deli meats daily increases your risks of colorectal cancer by 18%. I had no idea that what we ate affected cancer rates, but I never felt like I'd eaten a lot of processed meats until I realized that processed meat includes hot dogs, bacon, sausage, salami, ham, pepperoni, cold cuts, and deli slices, basically everything I grew up eating. The World Health Organization classifies processed meat as a Group 1 carcinogen, the same group as cigarettes, asbestos, and plutonium, and classifies red meat as a Group 2 carcinogen. Was this like I'd essentially been smoking my entire childhood? If processed meats are labeled the same as cigarettes, how is it even legal for kids to be eating this way? I thought this was new information, but many of these studies have been around for 50 years. I couldn't believe I'd been eating processed meats virtually my entire life and was just now finding out how dangerous they are. Why hadn't I been hearing about it from the American Cancer Society, the largest cancer group in the nation? When I went on their website, I was shocked to see that none of this information was featured on their homepage. But even more shocking, on their Eat Healthy page, they actually encouraged eating Group 1 carcinogenic foods like processed turkey and canned meats. This is after the World Health Organization reviewed over 800 studies definitively linking processed meat to cancer.
Thanks for calling your American Cancer Society. My name is Sam. I'm a cancer information specialist. How may I help you today?
Hi, I was calling because I was wondering why you all recommend people to eat processed meat on your website, which the World Health Organization has classified as a Group 1 carcinogen, which is in the same class as tobacco smoking, asbestos, and plutonium. This would be like a lung association having a how to roll your own cigarette section on their website. It's kind of the same thing.
Well, let me just place you on a brief hold because,
He wasn't able to answer my questions and said someone would get back with me. I had always been concerned about cancer because both my grandma and grandpa died of cancer. I wondered if things would have been different had they known the link between diet and this terrible disease.
Think about, actually, dietary choices trump smoking when it comes to those risks.
If I could deliver one message to the researchers who are looking for the cause of diabetes and the cause of clogged arteries and the cause of high blood pressure and the cause of obesity, I would tell them the answers in 3 words. It's the phone.
Dr. Neil Barnard, what role does sugar play in causing diabetes?
Drive me crazy. Diabetes is not and never was caused by eating a high carbohydrate diet, and it's not caused by eating sugar. The cause of diabetes is a diet that builds up the amount of fat into the blood. I'm talking about a typical meat-based, animal-based diet. You can look into the muscle cells of the human body and you find they're building up tiny particles of fat that's causing insulin resistance. What that means is the sugar that is naturally from the foods that you're eating can't get into the cells where it belongs. It builds up in the blood, and that's diabetes.
I had never heard that meat was associated with causing diabetes. We had always been told that sugar obesity caused it. Renowned weight loss bariatric surgeon Dr. Garth Davis, though, agreed.
Everyone thinks that they get diabetic because of carbs. They did a huge study in that EPIC study, 500,000 people. Carbs consumption was inversely related with diabetes. In other words, the more carbs someone ate, the less diabetes they had. But meat was strongly correlated. Get that aha moment. The starches, the carbs are good for you. They're not bad for you. This idea that carbs make you fat is utterly ridiculous. Carbs cannot make you fat in and of themselves. We have storage in our muscles and in our liver for carbs called glycogen. So when we eat carbs, we either store it or we burn it. Now, eat fat, that goes straight to your fat. Your body can't turn those carbs into fat unless you're really overdoing the calories. Obesity, it's a death sentence. You're at much higher risk of getting cancer. You're almost certainly going to get diabetes. I mean, no one wants to fat shame, and we all want everybody to be comfortable with our bodies, but this movement to be comfortable with our bodies has made us comfortable with being sick. And that's a huge problem. I go into the hospital and I look around me, people on dialysis, all these sick people, and just about every disease in there is because of what people are eating.
Here's the thing. If I eat a sugary cookie, the sugar lures you in like the Trojan horse, but waiting inside that cookie is a huge load of butter or shortening, and that's what fattens you up. And that's the part that leads to the diabetes. It's the fatty foods, not really so much the sugar.
It's not that sugar is good for you. There's no nutrients in it. It's excess calories. But when you eat sugar, you don't get inflammation right away. When you eat sugar, you're not getting plaques forming in your vessels. When you're eating sugar, your body's going to store most of it as glycogen or burn it as calories. And so this focus on sugar has taken all the focus off meat, dairy, eggs, pork, turkey, chicken.
People need to understand. If their child gets diabetes, you've just taken 19 years off their life.
Harvard researchers looked at 9 prospective studies finding that just one serving of processed meat per day increased risk of developing diabetes by 51%. The link between eating meat and developing diabetes became undeniable.
When we speak of heart disease, I would say the role of alcohol is pretty small. The role of sugar is very small too. Smoking is big, but the good news is that most people have quit or never did smoke. The problem with animal-based diet, its contribution to heart disease is huge, and it is pervasive.
All this expensive imaging, procedures, bypasses, medication, none of which has one solitary single thing to do with the causation of the illness. So you die of a completely benign, foodborne illness that never had its causation treated.
When we eat these kind of dead meat bacteria toxins, within minutes, you get this burst of inflammation within your system, such that you basically paralyze your arteries, you get this stiffening of the arteries, their inability to relax normally in half. So it's not like decades down the road eating unhealthy, there'll be some damage. No, we're talking damage right then and there, within minutes of it going into our mouth.
Many people are given the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease when it's not true Alzheimer's at all. The vast majority of people suffer dementia due to their tiny blood vessels in their brain clogging up and their nerve cells being shortchanged of oxygenated blood. And guess where that blood vessel dementia comes from? Those little tiny arteries are clogging up from that steady stream of bad cholesterol, etc.
It's really quite clear from the standpoint of cancer and the standpoint of cardiovascular disease that animal protein plays an enormous role.
Is chicken better?
It's a question of whether you want to be shot or hung.
The flesh food that I would eliminate from the American diet would be poultry, would be turkey and chicken. A brilliant advertising campaign has convinced people that, oh, it's white meat, it's healthier.
The leading source of sodium in the American diet for adult is chicken. It can be labeled all natural chicken, but be injected with the salt water, I think up to 800 milligrams of sodium.
Heterocyclic amines are clear-cut carcinogens, and they can form in any kind of meat as it's heated, as it's cooked. But by far the biggest source is chicken. We sent researchers into fast food and family restaurants. Not only were there carcinogens in every single restaurant, but we found them in every single chicken sample that we took. If somebody brings their family in and they're buying a bucket of chicken, nobody tells them that there are carcinogens. If you're selling carcinogens to people, you've got to warn them that they're in there.
But the American Cancer Society encourages people to switch from red and processed meat to chicken. Why would the American Cancer Society tell people to switch from eating one carcinogenic food to another when a Harvard University study showed that men with prostate cancer who eat large amounts of chicken increased their risk of the disease progressing 4 times?
The #1 dietary source in America of cholesterol is chicken because of the volume of chicken. You know, chicken's become grilled chicken and organic chicken. It's machismo, but it has nearly as much cholesterol per gram as red beef. So just on sheer volume, it's the #1 source. Yeah, eggs being close by.
I never really thought about eggs much. I just thought of them as a standard part of a healthy diet. But then I found a study suggesting that eating just 1 egg a day can be as bad as smoking 5 cigarettes per day for life expectancy.
The yolk of a hen's egg is the most concentrated glom of saturated fat and cholesterol. It is made to run a baby chicken for 21 days with no outside energy. It is pure fat and cholesterol. And when we put that into our bloodstream, it coats our red blood cells. Our blood gets thicker and more viscous. It changes our hormone levels. It raises our cholesterol levels. There's nothing healthy about eating the yolk of the egg.
But I thought cholesterol and saturated fat wasn't an issue anymore.
You know, these saturated fat studies that have come out trying to vindicate saturated fat, there's a campaign by the dairy industry, right? #1 source of saturated fat is dairy. It's not meat. 2008, the global dairy industry got together in a meeting and explicitly agreed their agenda was to neutralize the negative impact of milk fat by regulators and medical professionals, unquote. So what did they do? They funded studies.
The main study that started the whole saturated fat media craze was funded by the National Dairy Council. The egg industry similarly funds studies that confuse consumers by making claims that eggs don't negatively affect heart function. That is, only when compared to eating a McDonald's sausage McMuffin? So what they're really saying is that eating eggs is just as bad as eating a McMuffin.
When you eat foods like beef or steak or a processed meat, a hot dog, you're not just getting saturated fat. You're also getting other additional toxins that are in that food. There's heme ions, carcinogens, processing chemicals. This is all a lot more complicated than just looking at saturated fat.
You know, the strategy is not on making their products any safer. The strategy is to just try to confuse the public, to introduce doubt. You know, there's a famous tobacco industry memo. It's called Doubt is Our Product. That's all they had to do. They didn't have to convince Americans that smoking was healthy, right? They just had to introduce doubt. Then they would win. If there's just enough controversy, people kind of throw up their hands. I don't know what to eat. Confusion is their game.
I really don't think people thought what they ate led to heart disease. They think, oh, it's genetic, my parents had it. And I don't think people really think that what they ate led to diabetes. I think, oh, my parents had it, I was going to get it. And certainly cancer, they don't think that way.
People have bad lifestyles that they've inherited environmentally. They've been exposed to a certain way of eating and living that they've carried on into their adulthood, passed on to their children. That is why they go on to develop the same diseases that their parents and grandparents may have had before them. But it is.
In College of Cardiology, Dr. Kim Williams.
So the American College of Cardiology is a 47,000 member and growing organization with a dedicated mission to reduce heart disease and to improve patients' lives. And if you look at the incidence of hypertension and diabetes and mortality in men, they actually get reduced as you go higher and higher in terms of how much you restrict animal products.
What about fish?
So fish is a little different. You've got the 4 worries, which is PCBs, mercury, saturated fat, and cholesterol. And the cholesterol is all over the place. You can hit tuna and water, that'll be almost less than a glass of milk, to salmon or tilapia, which is higher than a pork chop.
If you look objectively at fish, what you find is they've become essentially mercury sponges. And that's why in many parts of the country they warn you, don't have more than so many of these fish a week because it's getting too much mercury can kill you.
Fish are eaten by bigger fish, or eaten by bigger fish, and these pesticides and herbicides bioaccumulate in the fish flesh. And these big fish, including the salmon, which people think is the healthiest fish, truth is the amount of pesticides and herbicides in the flesh of these fish are shocking, and they have estrogenic and cancer-promoting properties in them.
They'll say, well, but don't sardines have less concentration of toxic waste product than other ones? Something being less toxic doesn't make it healthy. It just makes it less toxic.
Farmed fish is by no means healthier. All the antibiotics that these animals have to be fed, similar to chickens and turkeys kept in confinement. These fish get infections. They get fungal infections. They get bacterial infections. You've got to feed them antifungals, antibiotics, and these substances accumulate in the fish flesh as well.
I always knew that pollution was bad for our health, but I never thought about the environmental pollutants affecting food.
Dioxins, being the most toxic man-made chemicals known to science, cause all sorts of things. They cause endometriosis, they cause cancers, they cause endocrine disruption problems. Most of your exposure, 93% of it, comes from eating meat and dairy products because it climbs up in the food chain so effectively. So you can get exposed to living near these incinerators and breathing it, but it'll take you 14 years to breathe in as much dioxin as a cow will ingest by eating the grass in one day. And that dioxin will accumulate in its fat, which includes the milk and the meat. And anyone eating meat or dairy products is going to get that dose of dioxin. So it climbs up the food chain every step. Men have no way in their bodies to get rid of dioxins, but women have two ways. They're both involving having a baby. One is that dioxin crosses the placenta into the growing infant, and the other is that it comes out from the breast milk. So if you have a meat and dairy consuming mother breastfeeding that infant, then the highest impacts of toxic exposure like mercury and dioxins will go to that infant.
Pregnant women are told certain types of fish should be avoided. But what about all these other animal products which are introducing, imagine as the fetus is developing, introducing these very harmful toxins which create reproductive abnormalities, developmental problems, and hormonal issues right as a child is developing, the most critical stage of development.
It does make you worry. When people say, don't you want to have a little bit of milk because you're pregnant? Don't you want to have some fish because you're pregnant? Who do you think is going to get the chemicals that are in that?
All these environmental toxins and toxins from the feed that they're being fed accumulate in their tissues and are released into the mother and unfortunately to the child when you eat these products when you're pregnant. So this includes antibiotics, hormones, steroids in animal feed. Commercial animals are largely fed GMO corn and soy, which are very laden in pesticides. PCBs have been banned since the 70s, but they persist in the environment. Dioxins, all of these compounds can create hormonal, reproductive, developmental damage as well.
Eating organic beef, poultry, pork, or fish will not help you avoid contaminants like mercury, like dioxins, like strontium-90, because they fall out over all sorts of farm fields and water bodies, and they don't skip over the organic fields. And so really the contaminants are coming in regardless of how these animals are raised.
Actually consumed by livestock, with dairy cows consuming the most per animal. This fact, with everything I learned about bioaccumulation, made dairy terrifying, especially considering how much cheese I ate in my life.
Cheese is an amazing product when you think about it. It's probably one of the single best foods at compromising health that you're going to actually feed to people. Think about it. You've got an animal product, so you've got all the issues of biological concentration. You have a highly processed food product, and not only does it have naturally a lot of saturated fat, but you put a lot of salt into it.
There's a strong link between dairy foods and autoimmune diseases, and so that can show itself up as excessive production of mucus and exacerbation of asthma in kids who are prone to that, and even adults. And also there's an association between dairy foods and multiple sclerosis and type 1 diabetes, which is an autoimmune disease, and other rheumatologic problems.
Cow's milk is baby calf growth food. That's what this stuff is. There's absolutely no child or human on earth who actually needs the milk of a cow.
Yeah, milk is a risky food for human consumption. As a pediatrician, I see on a daily basis children suffering from conditions that are linked or associated to dairy consumption, such as eczema, acne, constipation, acid reflux, iron deficiency, anemia. Cow's milk protein is the most allergenic food.
People say, well, no, I want hormone-free, not injected with bovine growth hormone. But milk is this hormonal fluid, so it's just packed with sex hormones and natural sex steroid hormones like estrogen, progesterone. In fact, doesn't matter if it's conventional milk, doesn't matter if it's organic milk. Milk without hormones, it's an oxymoron. Organic dairy has just as much saturated fat and cholesterol and galactose and all the things that you don't want as conventional dairy.
Dairy products in general have a lot of other products associated with it, not the least of which is pus. I mean, they actually have laws limiting how much pus you can actually have in a milk and still sell it. I believe it's like 750,000 pus cells per cc. Because, I mean, you wouldn't want too much pus. It would be like pure pus. People might object. In fact, you could think of cheese as kind of coagulated cow pus, if you would.
But I was always told that we need milk for strong bones.
Doctors have studied bone development in kids and whether they get stress fractures and that kind of thing. And the kids who drink the most milk have zero protection. Milk does not build strong bones. Harvard researchers have looked at a large group of older women. Over an 18-year period, the milk drinkers had zero protection from fracture.
Doing more research, I found that dairy was linked to many different types of cancer as well. Just like many of us, I thought that the majority of cancer was due to genes, but only 5 to 10% of cancer is actually genetic.
Any cancer is caused by a DNA mutation, but that's not enough. So that can cause that first cancer cell, but one cancer cell never killed anyone, 2 cancer cells never killed anyone, but 1 billion cancer cells, now we're running into problems. So we need to reduce the growth factors in our body, like IGF-1. Insulin-like growth factor 1 is this cancer-promoting growth hormone involved in every stage of cancer cell growth and spread and metastases. And any animal protein boosts the level of IGF-1.
Dairy products increases your risk for various forms of cancer, especially those related to your hormones, so breast cancer, prostate cancer, ovarian cancer. So this is not a product, even in its most pure state, you want to be consuming because it does come with risk.
I found out that dairy can increase a man's chance of getting prostate cancer by 34%. And for women who've had breast cancer, just 1 serving of whole dairy a day can increase their chance of dying from the disease 49%, and dying from anything 64%. No prevention for type 1 diabetes. But then, I did research and came across countless studies referencing the link between exposure to dairy at a young age and type 1 diabetes.
I mean, this is a food made for baby cows. Cow milk protein gets into the bloodstream. The body says, hey, this isn't supposed to be in the bloodstream. It makes antibodies to the cow milk protein, which then attack the pancreas and destroy the pancreas.
How is this possible that ADA wouldn't have this forefront on their website? Why wouldn't they be warning all parents about this, even if they're only a slight chance? Why? And there it was. The American Diabetes Association was taking money from Dannon, one of the world's largest dairy yogurt producers, Kraft Foods, makers of Velveeta processed cheese, Oscar Mayer processed meats, Lunchables processed kids meals, and Bumblebee Foods, makers of processed canned meats. American Cancer Society was taking money from Tyson, one of the world's largest meat producers, and Yum Brand, owner of Pizza Hut, KFC, and Taco Bell. Susan G. Komen was supposed to be fighting breast cancer, was corporate partnering with KFC, Dean Swanson Processed Meats, and Yoplait Yogurt. And the American Heart Association was probably the most disturbing of all, taking hundreds of thousands of dollars from the beef industry, poultry, and dairy producers, and millions from fast food and processed food manufacturers. Every single one of these organizations was taking money from meat and dairy companies that are associated with the causes of these diseases. This would be like the American Lung Association taking money from the tobacco industry. U.S. government is involved too. Every 5 years, the U.S. Department of Agriculture creates dietary guidelines for Americans. The committee who writes these guidelines has been made up of individuals who have received money from McDonald's, the National Dairy Council, the American Meat Institute, the National Dairy Board, the National Livestock and Meat Board, the American Egg Board, Dannon, candy and sugar companies, Coca-Cola, and Anheuser, just to name a few, which means we're getting our dietary recommendations from the very industries that are killing us.
And when the USDA makes a pyramid or a power plate every 5 years for the American public, they're going to guarantee that on that plate are going to be foods which, when consumed, will result in millions of Americans perishing.
The USDA, which is supposed to be protecting us, has two missions. It's supposed to protect us, and it's supposed to protect the producer. And guess what? When those two come head to head, they usually choose the producer.
In internal documents uncovered by Dr. Greger, the USDA admitted that eggs cannot legally be called nutritious, low-fat, part of a balanced diet, low-calorie, healthful, healthy, can't say it's good for you, or even safe. Yet they still promote these products to the American people through federal checkoff programs.
If you ask somebody if they've heard of the checkoff program, the odds are they haven't, although daily they are seeing the messaging that these programs produce. So checkoff programs are responsible for the messages that we see on TV, on the internet, on bus billboards and magazines that say things like, milk, it does a body good, or milk life, beef, it's what's for dinner, pork, be inspired, incredible edible egg.
The dairy checkoff program gave $12 million to Domino's to just market cheese-heavy product program.
That's one of the things that makes checkoffs so incredibly creepy, is that it is our government telling us, eat more beef, drink more milk, eat more cheese, eat more pork. One of the very effective ways that the dairy industry promotes its products is to reach children, because kids are impressionable, they're going to be consumers for their entire lives, and you might as well get them while they're young. So dairy spends at least $50 million promoting its products in public schools throughout the country with posters with people with milk mustaches and messages like milk, it does a body good, or milk life.
Targeting young people, right? The tobacco industry had to keep replacing their customers who are dying with new customers. Meat industry knows they have to target young people. That's why we have these foods in schools and marketing messages at a younger and younger age for kids to get hooked on all the wrong kinds of foods. So there's all kinds of parallels.
School districts where processed meats are all over the place. Maybe it's going to be bacon on the menu, sausage, hot dogs, or pepperoni pizza. Any of those things are processed meats, and those are pretty much the worst of the worst with a direct link to colon cancer. And yet you have every day in the schools meal items with processed meats.
If the Surgeon General puts warning labels on tobacco because of their cancer risk, why aren't the same warning labels on meat?
Based on the publicly available data, we know they spend at least $557 million promoting their goods through checkoff programs. We know that they spend at least $138 million lobbying Congress. We expect that they spend a good deal more than that in figures that simply aren't publicly disclosed.
Then there's the whole pharmaceutical aspect of it, and the fact that there's a very strong pharmaceutical industry and lobby that has a huge stake in preserving the status quo.
These chronic diseases, these are the cash cows of the pharmaceutical industry.
You have a $5 billion stent industry. Do they ever want to see that go away? We've got a $35 billion statin drug industry. Do they ever want to see that go away?
In the U.S., treating chronic disease such as heart disease, cancer, and diabetes is a $1.5 trillion industry. That's the GDP equivalent of the 10th richest country in the world. I went back and dug deeper into the health organization's funding, and there it was again. These organizations were accepting millions of dollars from pharmaceutical companies that are making billions of dollars from the very same diseases these health groups are supposedly trying to end. It seemed like a major conflict of interest, and thus ending these diseases isn't really the goal. The pharmaceutical industry spends more money on lobbying than any other single industry. Just like animal agriculture, they are so powerful they write their own laws that have had activists in prison to silence them.
Government's in bed with anyone that gives them the most money, which is the pharmaceutical industry, which is the animal ag industry. It's like they are pumping the government full of money and resources, and in return the government's giving them what they want, subsidies, imprisoning activists that go against them. And I think it's quite telling that these industries are working so hard and spending so much money to criminalize people for simply taking a picture, for simply recording what's going on inside these facilities and making it known to the public. They're behind walls, and they're underground. They're in these secret facilities that no one knows about. But if they did, they would be shocked and outraged. And I think people would not want to think that their pharmaceuticals, that their food are coming from these places. And that's why I think the ag laws are what they are, is because they are trying to silence people into not speaking out and not showing the truth.
I came to True North to help me with my asthma and to lose a little weight, and it's amazing. Just in 2 weeks of changing my diet, don't have to take any asthma medication, no antidepressants, no pain medication, no heart medication, nothing, no medications at all. And it's just incredible. I was taking Oxy and Advil, and I was taking 800 milligrams of Motrin 3 times a day just to get through the day because I was in so much pain. And now, nothing. Wow. Nothing at all.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. So 14 days.
All that medication completely off.
Completely off everything. It's just been so frustrating to me because I went to so many different doctors for help, and I tried so many different medications to help me with my asthma, and nothing helped. And I was stuck on the couch for the last 10 months, unable to breathe. And now in 2 weeks' time, 14 days, I'm off my medication, and I can breathe, and I feel good, and I can walk. My life has changed, and it only took 2 weeks of a whole plant-based diet.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible. But what's an animal flesh or dairy that you can't get in plant-based?
Cholesterol, heterocyclic amines, E. coli. You don't even think about it. There is nothing in an animal-based diet that you can't get in healthier form somewhere else.
The only other vitamin is vitamin B12. It's not made by plants, not made by animals either, made by little microbes that blanket the earth. So because of the way we live in a sanitized world, unless you're eating bacteria-contaminated foods, we need to get a source of B12 from somewhere. So the healthiest, cheapest, safest source is to get a vitamin B12 fortified food or vitamin B12 supplement, not to get it from meat and dairy.
What about people who say they have to eat meat for their blood type or their genes?
I mean, it's like I need me because I'm a Capricorn. I need me because I have an A+ blood. I mean, it's like, what do you say?
Valentine's Day, I decided to go vegan and give up all meat, which was never in my thoughts in a million years. But I've heard so much success from people that are vegan. And so I gave up all animal products whatsoever. I've lost 29 pounds. I've been able to cut my meds in half. I've been able to cut my insulin in half. And now I'm going for the moon. I'm going to cut it all out.
My mission is to let everybody know you do not have to suffer from diabetes and cancer and heart disease because someone in your family had it or because the doctors are telling you this is what's going to happen. You can take charge of your health and have a positive outcome just like I did. The reason I'm so committed to this is my grandmother had diabetes and I didn't know what I know now about healing the body. And if I did, I feel like she could have lived at least a few years longer. And so it's in her honor that I do what I do. Because I can save someone else's grandmother, aunt, uncle, father from that. You know? So I'm excited about getting the message out there.
Where true health doesn't end with me, but begins with us.
If people adopted a plant-based diet, the changes we would see in our individual health, in our national health situation, and in this physical environmental world we live in would be so profound.
But today, you can say, I'm not going to eat that stuff anymore. It's one thing that I can do myself personally to make a difference.
It will give you a greater sense of well-being and happiness when you know that, one, you're not destroying your health every time you sit down to eat, you're not promoting cruelty, and you're not damaging the earth.
I don't want my gains to be at the detriment of the planet of other things. And yet, I'm not weaker, I'm stronger. That's the beauty of it. When you're altruistic, when you make choices for the greater good of others, it comes around, benefits me as well, it benefits us all.
Studies show that we can not only survive, but we can thrive.
I just feel this is a great way to live. Not harming other beings when we can be healthy and happier. I love it. It's a great life. I never thought that I could feel this good at this age, and I just want everybody to feel this way. I feel like a 20-year-old. I'm almost 50.
Nothing tastes as good as healthy feels, basically.
And so the choices that we make every single day, day in and day out, around our food has the capacity to bring us true health and optimal wellness, not just individually, but collectively, as a species and for our planet.
We're not going to live forever, but while we are alive, we can live well. And for me as a doctor, that's what I want to see.
Where there's a will, there is a way. I believe that.